I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love.
In an unprecedented meltdown that has sent shockwaves through Hollywood, actress Rachel Zegler unleashed a scorching 47-minute tirade against Disney executives during an impromptu press conference yesterday, hours after learning that her controversial Snow White remake had been permanently pulled from theatrical release worldwide, and that she had lost her $120 million lawsuit against the entertainment giant. The stunning outburst, captured on dozens of smartphones and immediately trending across all social media platforms, occurred in the lobby of the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, where Zegler had been staying during the final days of her legal battle. Visibly distraught and ignoring the desperate attempts of her publicist to intervene, the 25-year-old actress delivered what industry insiders are already calling the most self-destructive public statement in modern Hollywood history. "They've taken everything from me, my reputation, my career, and now they're burying the film entirely," Zegler shouted to the growing crowd of journalists and onlookers. 2 years of my life, erased because a bunch of executives got scared of their own shadow. Well, I'm done being silenced. I'm done pretending. You want to know what really happened on that set? You want the truth about Disney? I've got nothing left to lose. The extraordinary public meltdown came just hours after Judge Raymond Thornton delivered the devastating double blow in Los Angeles Superior Court. Not only dismissing Zegler's $120 million lawsuit against Disney for breach of contract and defamation, but also ruling in favor of Disney's countersuit, awarding the studio $38.5 million in damages for what the judge described as willful and malicious actions designed to undermine the commercial viability of the production. Adding to the unprecedented situation, Disney CEO Michael Brennan announced immediately following the verdict that the company had made the difficult but necessary decision to cancel the planned theatrical release of Snow White entirely, opting instead for a heavily edited version to be released directly to Disney Plus later this year. Industry analysts estimate the studio has written off approximately $325 million on the troubled production. The film as currently constructed is no longer commercially viable in the theatrical marketplace, Brennan stated in a press release. This decision, while painful financially, represents the best path forward for our shareholders and the long-term health of the Snow White intellectual property. During her impromptu press conference, Zegler made explosive allegations about the production, claiming that the original director's vision had been systematically dismantled by studio executives who became increasingly nervous about the film's darker, feminist reinterpretation of the classic fairy tale. "They hired us to reinvent Snow White for a modern audience, to give her agency and purpose beyond waiting for a prince," Zegler claimed, pacing frantically as she spoke. Then the first test screening happens. A few audience members complain that it doesn't match their childhood memories, and suddenly we're doing emergency reshoots to put the genie back in the bottle. They gutted this film out of pure cowardice. The actress went on to make specific allegations about the extensive reshoots, claiming that over 70% of her original performance had been cut from the final version of the film. "They literally digitally altered my face in some scenes to make me smile more," she alleged. "They added voiceover I never recorded. They changed entire plot points without bothering to make them make sense." Perhaps most damagingly, Zegler directly accused several high-ranking Disney executives by name, claiming they had deliberately sabotaged the film after becoming concerned about potential controversy. "They created the very problem they were afraid of," she said. "Their paranoia became a self-fulfilling prophecy." The lawsuit, filed by Zegler 14 months ago, had alleged that Disney had substantially altered her role without consultation, violated specific contractual guarantees regarding her character's portrayal, and subsequently attempted to force her to promote a version of the film that bore little resemblance to what she had agreed to make. Disney's aggressive countersuit had claimed that Zegler violated her contractual obligations through a systematic campaign of subtle undermining during the film's troubled marketing campaign, pointing to numerous interviews and social media posts that they argued had contributed to negative public perception of the film before its release. During the trial, Disney's legal team presented evidence including private text messages and emails in which Zegler allegedly discussed strategies for distancing herself from the project, while technically staying within the boundaries of her contractual obligations. Particularly damaging was a text exchange with a friend in which she reportedly wrote, "I have to promote this disaster without actually promoting it. Watch how I use my eyes in tomorrow's interview. I'm saying everything I'm not allowed to say out loud." The judge's 42-page ruling was unsparing in its assessment of Zegler's actions, stating that she had engaged in a deliberate and sophisticated campaign to undermine the very project she was contractually obligated to support, and that her behavior represented a textbook case of bad faith performance of contractual duties. Entertainment attorneys have noted that the $38.5 million judgment against Zegler is among the largest ever levied against an individual performer, likely exceeding her current assets and potentially impacting her earnings for decades to come. During her hotel lobby tirade, Zegler addressed the financial judgment directly. "They know I don't have $38 million. This isn't about money. It's about making an example of me. It's about sending a message to every other actor who might consider speaking up when a studio butchers their work." Well, congratulations, Disney. Message received. You've won. You've destroyed me. I hope it was worth it. The actress went on to make the stunning announcement that she was walking away from Hollywood permanently and planned to release a tell-all memoir detailing her experiences. "I came to this industry as a teenager full of hope and passion for storytelling. I'm leaving it at 25 completely disillusioned about what Hollywood really is, a machine that chews up artists and spits them out the moment they become inconvenient." Industry reaction to Zegler's meltdown has been swift and polarized. Several prominent directors and actors have expressed private support for her position while publicly maintaining distance from her specific allegations. A handful of outspoken industry veterans, including directors Ava DuVernay and Guillermo del Toro, have posted messages of support, with del Toro writing, "When art becomes purely corporate product, truth becomes a liability. I stand with those brave enough to speak their truth, whatever the cost." Others have been less sympathetic, noting that Zegler's contractual obligations were standard for the industry, and that her approach to the situation showed poor judgment. "There are effective ways to advocate for your artistic vision within the studio system," noted veteran producer Samantha Richards. "Public immolation of your career isn't one of them." Disney has declined to comment directly on Zegler's allegations, releasing only a brief statement. "We respect Ms. Zegler's right to express her opinions, but categorically deny the characterizations made during her recent statements. Given the ongoing legal situation, we will not be commenting further." The immediate impact on Zegler's career has been severe and immediate. Sources at 3 major agencies have confirmed that ongoing casting discussions involving the actress have been terminated, and a Netflix project that was in pre-production with Zegler attached has officially announced recasting her role. Talent manager Ricardo Vega, who does not represent Zegler, offered a blunt assessment. "Hollywood can forgive almost anything except costing a studio hundreds of millions of dollars. The combination of the lawsuit, the film being pulled from theaters, and now this public meltdown. It's career suicide. No studio will touch her after this, at least not for many, many years." The controversy has sparked intense debate within the entertainment industry about the power dynamics between studios and talent, the increasing corporate control over creative content, and the legal and professional risks faced by performers who speak out against studio decisions. This situation highlights the fundamental tension in modern Hollywood, noted entertainment journalist Rebecca Chen. Studios want the authenticity and passion of artists when it serves marketing purposes, but they also demand absolute compliance with corporate decision-making. When those forces collide, the results can be catastrophic for individual careers. As video clips of Zegler's outburst continue to accumulate millions of views online, the actress herself has reportedly checked out of her hotel and disappeared from public view. Her representatives released a brief statement late last night. Ms. Zegler is taking time to process recent events and focus on her well-being. She will not be making additional public statements at this time. For Disney, the financial impact of the Snow White debacle represents one of the most expensive failures in recent studio history. Analysts estimate the combined costs of production, marketing, legal fees, and the canceled theatrical release will result in a write-down exceeding $400 million in the upcoming quarterly report. For Rachel Zegler, who rose to fame just 4 years ago with her breakthrough role in Spielberg's West Side Story, the personal and professional costs appear even more profound. What began as a dream role in a Disney fairy tale has transformed into a cautionary tale about the high-stakes reality of modern Hollywood, where the line between artistic integrity and contractual obligation has never been more treacherously thin. As one studio executive commented anonymously, "There are no winners here. Disney loses hundreds of millions, audiences lose a film that had enormous potential, and a talented young actress has likely lost her career. The only thing that's been created here is a perfect storm of how everything in this business can go catastrophically wrong."
There are growing calls tonight for Disney to fire Rachel Zegler, the star of its widely anticipated Snow White remake. It's because of an anti-Donald Trump post.
In a candid interview that has sent ripples through Hollywood, Gal Gadot has broken her silence on the ongoing Rachel Zegler controversy, offering unprecedented insight into Disney's decision to terminate their relationship with the young actress. Speaking during an in-depth profile with Vanity Fair to promote her upcoming film, Gadot provided what industry insiders are calling the most comprehensive explanation yet of the behind-the-scenes events that led to one of the most public Hollywood fallouts in recent memory. Gadot, who worked briefly with Zegler during pre-production meetings for a project that was ultimately shelved, prefaced her comments by personal sympathy for the young actress, while maintaining that Disney's decision was ultimately justified by a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond the public controversies surrounding the Snow White remake. "What happened with Rachel is truly unfortunate, and my heart goes out to her as someone who remembers the pressures of navigating this industry at a young age," Gadot stated. "But what the public has seen is really just the tip of the iceberg. There were serious issues happening behind closed doors that made continuing the relationship untenable for Disney, regardless of the Snow White situation." According to Gadot, whose close relationships with several high-ranking Disney executives gave her unique insight into the decision-making process, Zegler's public criticisms of the Snow White creative direction were actually a relatively minor concern compared to other behavioral issues that had been documented over an extended period. The narrative that Disney cut ties with Rachel simply because she spoke out about creative differences is not accurate, Gadot explained. "From what I understand, there were multiple formal warnings about professional conduct that predated any public comments about the film. These included repeated violations of set protocols, unauthorized script revisions, and particularly concerning interactions with crew members." Gadot revealed that Disney executives had implemented a specialized mentorship program for Zegler early in the Snow White production, after recognizing what they perceived as warning signs regarding her adjustment to the pressures of leading a major studio production. This program reportedly included regular check-ins with industry veterans and access to specialized coaching for media interactions. Disney actually invested significant resources in trying to help Rachel navigate the transition from being a newcomer to carrying a $300 million production, Gadot stated. They brought in experienced mentors, provided additional media training, and repeatedly tried to address concerns in constructive ways. This wasn't a case of a studio being unsupportive, quite the opposite. According to Gadot, the breaking point came not from Zegler's public comments, but from an incident during reshoots that has not previously been reported. While declining to provide specific details, Gadot alluded to a serious breach of protocol that potentially endangered other cast members and resulted in a production delay, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. "There was an incident during reshoots, and I want to be careful about how I discuss this because I wasn't personally present. But it crossed a line that went beyond creative differences or unprofessional behavior," Gadot explained. "It created a situation where insurance underwriters became involved and raised serious concerns about liability. At that point, the studio's hands were essentially tied." The Wonder Woman star emphasized that Disney's decision to ultimately terminate their relationship with Zegler came only after multiple interventions and opportunities for course correction. According to Gadot, the final decision involved not just creative executives, but also legal, human resources, and insurance representatives, who unanimously concluded that the relationship had become unworkable. What I know for certain is that this decision wasn't made lightly or reactively, Gadot stated. There were multiple meetings at the highest levels of the company, involving people whose entire careers are built on developing and protecting talent. The fact that they ultimately reached this conclusion speaks to the seriousness of the situation. Gadot also addressed the widespread speculation about Disney's decision to substantially alter Zegler's performance in the final cut of Snow White, confirming that the changes were far more extensive than previously reported. According to Gadot, nearly 70% of Zegler's original performance was either modified or replaced through a combination of reshoots with body doubles, digital alterations, and voice work by another actress. The version of Snow White that audiences will eventually see on Disney Plus is essentially a completely reconstructed performance, Gadot revealed. I've been told that they brought in another actress to record dialogue that was digitally integrated with visual elements from Rachel's performance. The technical challenges this created were enormous and added significantly to the production costs. Gadot explained that Disney's decision to go to such extraordinary lengths rather than simply recasting the role entirely stemmed from contractual obligations and the prohibitive cost of completely restarting production. According to Gadot, the studio had already invested over $240 million in the production before making the decision to substantially alter Zegler's performance. They were essentially trapped in an impossible situation, Gadot said. Starting over wasn't financially viable, but continuing with the original performance wasn't creatively acceptable based on test audience reactions. The digital reconstruction approach they ultimately chose was incredibly expensive and technically challenging, but still less costly than abandoning the entire production. The interview also addressed the widespread industry rumors about Zegler's behavior during promotional activities for the film. Gadot confirmed that Disney executives had become increasingly concerned about Zegler's media appearances, citing specific instances where the actress had deviated significantly from approved talking points despite explicit guidance from marketing teams. There were multiple instances where Rachel would agree to specific messaging in pre-interview briefings and then deliberately contradict those points once cameras were rolling, Gadot explained. This created enormous challenges for the marketing team, who were trying to position the film in a specific way. Eventually, they reached a point where they couldn't predict what she might say, which is absolutely terrifying when you're promoting a $300 million family film. According to Gadot, Disney's marketing department had compiled a comprehensive analysis of the financial impact of Zegler's public statements, estimating that certain comments had directly resulted in measurable negative impacts on audience interest and pre-release tracking numbers. The data was apparently quite striking, Gadot said. They could track specific declines in key metrics following particular interviews or social media posts. When you're dealing with a production of this scale, even small percentage shifts in audience interest translate to millions of dollars in potential revenue. It became impossible to ignore the correlation. Gadot also addressed the legal battle between Zegler and Disney, suggesting that the public narrative around the lawsuit had been substantially distorted. According to Gadot, Disney had initially attempted to resolve the situation without litigation, offering Zegler a generous settlement package that included releasing her from contractual obligations for future projects while providing transition support to help rebuild her career. From what I understand, Disney's initial approach was actually quite compassionate given the circumstances, Gadot stated. They recognized that Rachel was young and still learning how to navigate the industry, and they wanted to find a path forward that wouldn't permanently damage her career prospects. The lawsuit only materialized after she rejected multiple settlement offers and began making public statements that Disney considered factually inaccurate and potentially damaging. The interview took an unexpected turn when Gadot addressed the personal toll the controversy had taken on executives and creative team members who had initially championed Zegler's casting. According to Gadot, several key figures who had personally advocated for Zegler felt betrayed by her subsequent actions and were devastated by the project's collapse. There are people who put their professional reputations on the line to support Rachel's casting, Gadot explained. These were passionate advocates who believed in her talent and fought internal battles to give her this opportunity. When things unraveled, these same people faced serious professional consequences. Some were removed from projects, others saw their influence within the company diminished. The human cost extended far beyond just Rachel's career. Gadot expressed particular concern for the film's director, who she claimed had been unfairly scapegoated for production problems that stemmed largely from challenges managing Zegler's on-set behavior. According to Gadot, the director had repeatedly attempted to address issues through constructive feedback and additional support rather than escalating concerns to studio executives. The director tried so hard to make it work, to protect Rachel and give her space to find her footing. Gadot said that loyalty ultimately backfired when problems weren't addressed early enough. Now this incredibly talented director is struggling to get another major project greenlit because of how this situation unfolded. It's heartbreaking. When asked about Zegler's future prospects in the industry, Gadot offered a nuanced perspective that balanced sympathy with pragmatic assessment. She suggested that while Zegler's immediate career opportunities have been severely limited by the controversy, the long-term outlook depends entirely on how the young actress responds to this setback. Hollywood has a long history of comeback stories, Gadot observed. What matters now is how Rachel processes this experience and what she learns from it. If she can demonstrate genuine growth, accountability, and professionalism in smaller projects, I believe pathways will eventually open up again. This industry is ultimately pragmatic. Talent, combined with reliability, will always find opportunities. Gadot concluded the discussion by offering some personal advice for Zegler, drawing on her own experiences navigating the challenges of global fame and the intense scrutiny that comes with leading major franchises. If I could speak directly to Rachel, I would tell her that this moment, painful as it is, doesn't have to define her career or her life. Gadot said, every successful person in this industry has faced significant setbacks. What matters is not the fall, but how you rise afterward. Take the time to reflect honestly. Surround yourself with people who will tell you difficult truths, rather than what you want to hear. And approach the next phase with humility and a commitment to growth. The Vanity Fair profile notes that representatives for both Disney and Zegler declined to comment on Gadot's statements. Industry reaction to the interview has been mixed, with some praising Gadot's candor, while others question whether such detailed discussion of another actress's professional challenges was appropriate. For now, Disney continues to move forward with its plans to release a substantially reworked version of Snow White directly to its streaming platform later this year, while Zegler has reportedly begun preliminary discussions about taking on smaller, independent projects as a first step toward rebuilding her career. The controversy stands as a sobering reminder of the extraordinary pressures facing young performers in today's entertainment landscape, where the traditional challenges of navigating Hollywood are now amplified by social media scrutiny and the unprecedented financial stakes of modern blockbuster filmmaking.
Thank you. I love movies. I love making them. And I am a fan of movies, and I'm surrounded by movie fans tonight.
The sprawling estate belonging to Rachel Zegler had always been a subject of curiosity among locals in the small coastal town of Millfield. Perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, the Victorian mansion with its manicured gardens and imposing iron gates had been in the Zegler family for generations. Rachel, a reclusive figure known primarily for her family's historical wealth and occasional philanthropy, had inherited the property 20 years earlier, and had since become increasingly withdrawn from public life. Few people in Millfield could claim to know much about Rachel Zegler, beyond scattered rumors and occasional glimpses when she ventured into town for supplies. Some said she was an eccentric artist, others that she was simply a private person who preferred her own company to the gossip of small-town life. What no one suspected was that the Zegler estate would soon become the center of an FBI investigation that would shock the nation and rewrite the understanding of a historical mystery that had remained unsolved for decades. The initial investigation began not with Rachel Zegler herself, but with a routine audit of historical insurance claims. The FBI's art crime team, a specialized unit focused on art theft and fraud, had been reviewing cold cases involving unrecovered artwork when they noticed unusual patterns in claims filed by the Zegler family in the 1950s. Several valuable paintings had been reported destroyed in a small house fire at their previous residence, with substantial insurance payments issued despite limited documentation of the original artworks. These insurance claims might have remained nothing more than a footnote in a dusty file had it not been for a separate investigation into an international art trafficking ring operating along the eastern seaboard. During a raid on a storage facility in Boston, agents discovered correspondence that mentioned a Z collection that was described as the perfect cover for certain operations. One letter specifically mentioned Rachel's place as a location where something valuable was being kept hiding in plain sight. While the connection was tenuous, it was enough for investigators to take a closer look at Rachel Zegler and her property. Initial background checks revealed few red flags. Rachel had no criminal record, paid her taxes on time, and had limited financial transactions beyond managing her inheritance and making regular donations to ocean conservation causes. Her only known connection to the art world was through her late grandfather, Harold Zegler, who had been a moderately successful collector focusing primarily on maritime paintings. The breakthrough came when agents discovered that Harold Zegler had once been close friends with a gallery owner who had been investigated, though never charged, in connection with artwork that had disappeared during World War II. This tenuous connection, combined with the suspicious insurance claims and the reference in the trafficking case, was enough to secure a limited search warrant for the Zegler property. When FBI agents arrived at the estate on a misty Tuesday morning, they were greeted by Rachel Zegler herself, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair and an unexpectedly welcoming demeanor for someone about to have her home searched by federal agents. "I've been wondering when someone would finally come looking," she reportedly told the lead agent, a cryptic statement that would take on significant meaning as the search progressed. The initial warrant was narrow in scope, focusing on specific areas of the house where financial records and documentation related to the insurance claims might be stored. Agents began in the library, a wood-paneled room lined with books and featuring an impressive view of the ocean. It was here that they made their first unexpected discovery. Behind a hinged bookshelf, activated by removing a specific leather-bound volume, was a hidden door leading to a room that didn't appear on any of the property's architectural plans. This hidden room, approximately 15 feet square with no windows, had been carefully climate-controlled. Inside, agents found not the financial records they had been seeking, but the first indication that the Zegler property contained secrets far beyond insurance fraud. The walls were lined with paintings, not maritime scenes like Harold Zegler's known collection, but modernist works that even non-experts among the agents recognized as significant. A quick consultation with the art crime team's database confirmed their initial suspicion. They were looking at paintings that had been reported stolen or destroyed during the chaos of World War II. When confronted with this discovery, Rachel Zegler made no attempt to deny knowledge of the hidden room or its contents. Instead, she led agents to her study where she retrieved a leather portfolio containing detailed documentation about each painting, their provenance, the circumstances of their acquisition, and most surprisingly, careful research into their rightful ownership before the war. "My grandfather wasn't a thief," she explained to the increasingly bewildered agents. "He was a rescuer, but the full story is more complicated than you might think." What Rachel Zegler revealed over the next several hours fundamentally changed the direction of the investigation. According to her account, supported by the extensive documentation she provided, Harold Zegler had been involved in recovering artwork looted during World War II, not as an official part of any recovery effort, but as a private citizen with connections in both Europe and America, who who had become aware of artwork being quietly moved through unofficial channels. Rather than simply reporting these discoveries to authorities, Harold had made a fateful decision. He would recover the artwork himself, document everything meticulously, and keep the pieces safe until they could be properly returned. His motivation, according to letters Rachel shared with investigators, was concern that in the chaotic post-war period, returned artwork might not actually make it back to rightful owners, but would instead be claimed by governments or opportunistic individuals. He meant to return everything, Rachel told the agents. He kept records of every original owner he could identify. But then, the Cold War complicated matters, with many owners now behind the Iron Curtain. He became concerned that returning the artwork might result in it being nationalized by communist governments rather than restored to families. So he waited. As the search expanded beyond the initial hidden room, agents made a series of increasingly stunning discoveries. The Zegler mansion contained not one, but several concealed spaces, each dedicated to different collections of recovered items. One room held exclusively paintings and sculptures believed lost in the Dresden bombing. Another contained Jewish religious artifacts that had been confiscated by Nazi authorities. A third held rare books and manuscripts from libraries across Eastern Europe. Each collection was meticulously documented, with Harold Zegler's original notes supplemented by Rachel's own research continuing the work of identifying rightful owners or their descendants. Temperature, humidity, and light were carefully controlled in each space to preserve the items according to museum-quality conservation standards. It became clear that what had begun as a suspected case of insurance fraud and potential art trafficking had instead revealed one of the most significant private preservation efforts of cultural artifacts from World War II. The most shocking discovery came 3 days into the search, when agents accessed a secure room in the basement of the property. Unlike the other hidden spaces, this one was protected by a modern security system requiring both a key and a numerical code. Inside, they found not artwork or cultural artifacts, but stacks of leather-bound journals, photographic negatives, and microfilm reels. An archive of information that Harold Zegler had compiled about the broader network of looted artwork and the individuals involved in both its theft and subsequent movement. This archive included information that went well beyond what was publicly known about art looting during the war. It contained names of collaborators who had never been identified, locations of additional caches of artwork that remained missing, and perhaps most significantly, documentation of how certain individuals had reinvented themselves after the war, taking on new identities while continuing to profit from art with questionable provenance. My grandfather realized at some point that he had uncovered something much bigger than just the artwork he managed to recover, Rachel explained. He was documenting a network that continued to operate long after the war ended. People with influence, with connections to governments and financial institutions. That's when he truly went into hiding, in plain sight. And that's when the research became as important as the recovery. For Rachel Zegler, this had become her inheritance and her life's work. Trained as an art historian, she had dedicated herself to continuing her grandfather's documentation efforts, using developing technologies to expand the research and maintain the preserved collections. Her reclusiveness, it turned out, was not due to eccentricity, but to the secrecy her work required and the potential risk it entailed if the individuals or their descendants named in the archive became aware of its existence. The FBI's discovery presented immediate and complex challenges. The recovered artwork and artifacts, valued conservatively in the hundreds of millions of dollars, represented one of the most significant finds of previously lost cultural heritage in decades. The proper handling of these items would involve not just law enforcement, but international diplomacy, as multiple countries could make legitimate claims to various pieces. Even more sensitive was the archive of information, which contained allegations about prominent individuals, some still living, and others whose families remained influential. The documentation, while extensive, would require careful verification before any public accusations could be made. Yet the historical significance of finally understanding the full scope of the wartime looting and its aftermath was undeniable. As news of the discovery began to leak to the press, the quiet town of Millfield found itself at the center of international attention. Journalists descended on the local coffee shop, hoping for insights about the mysterious Rachel Zegler. Art historians and museum curators from around the world petitioned for access to the recovered works. representatives from multiple governments requested meetings with FBI officials to discuss potential repatriation of cultural treasures. For Rachel Zegler, the FBI discovery brought both vindication and uncertainty. The work that had consumed 3 generations of her family was finally receiving recognition, and the preserved artwork would eventually make its way to museums and, where possible, to the descendants of original owners. Yet the very public exposure of secrets kept for decades also brought anxiety about potential repercussions from those implicated in her grandfather's extensive documentation. In the months following the initial discovery, a special task force was established to manage the complex process of authenticating, documenting, and determining the appropriate disposition of each item found on the Zegler property. Art historians who gained access to the previously unknown works spoke of rewriting art history, as pieces long believed destroyed were studied for the first time in generations. Holocaust research organizations worked to match religious artifacts with descendant communities, creating emotional reunions between families and treasured heritage items thought lost forever. The information archive proved equally valuable, though more controversial. After careful verification processes, evidence from Harold Zegler's documentation led to the resolution of dozens of previously cold cases involving missing artwork. Several high-profile legal cases were initiated based on newly discovered evidence of complicity in wartime looting. Museums around the world began reviews of their collections based on the new information, in some cases identifying pieces with questionable provenance that had been overlooked in previous assessments. For the FBI's art crime team, the Zegler discovery represented the most significant case in the unit's history. What had begun as a routine review of old insurance claims had revealed not only an extraordinary collection of recovered artwork, but also an archive that fundamentally changed the understanding of how looted cultural property had moved through the decades following World War II. Agents involved in the case often remarked that it was like finding not just the missing artwork, but the detailed map of how and why it had disappeared. Rachel Zegler herself emerged as a complex figure in the unfolding story. Initially viewed with suspicion as a potential trafficker or fraud, she came to be recognized as the dedicated custodian of both recovered cultural treasures and historical truth. Her decision to continue her grandfather's work, maintaining the secret collection while expanding the research, represented an unusual approach to cultural preservation, one that operated outside official channels but was ultimately motivated by a commitment to both conservation and justice. The legal status of the Zegler collection remained complicated. While Rachel had not been the original acquirer of the items, she had maintained possession of artwork she knew had been taken from rightful owners, regardless of her grandfather's intentions or her own research toward eventual restitution. Prosecutors ultimately decided against criminal charges, recognizing the unique circumstances and the fact that her cooperation had enabled the recovery and documentation of items that might otherwise have remained lost. Instead, a complex agreement was reached wherein Rachel would serve as a consultant to the recovery task force, sharing her extensive knowledge of both the collection and the archive, while relinquishing control of the physical items. The Zegler estate itself, with its sophisticated hidden rooms and preservation systems, was temporarily converted into a secure facility for the ongoing work of documentation and restitution planning. Art world observers noted the irony that the Zegler property, originally suspected as the site of criminal activity, had actually been functioning as something between a private museum and an investigative archive. An unauthorized but ultimately beneficial preservation effort that had saved cultural heritage that might otherwise have been lost to history. This recognition complicated traditional narratives about art recovery and raised questions about the limitations of official channels in addressing historical injustices. For the residents of Millfield, the transformation of their town into the center of an international art recovery effort brought both pride and disruption. Local businesses benefited from the influx of officials, experts, and media, while longtime residents shared previously unimportant memories of Rachel Zegler's rare appearances in town, now recontextualized as glimpses of a woman carrying the weight of an extraordinary secret. The full accounting of the Zegler collection continued for years, with new connections and discoveries emerging as the archive was methodically analyzed. Each painting, artifact, and document represented not just an item of cultural significance, but a thread in the complex tapestry of wartime looting and its multi-generational aftermath. Artists whose work had been thought lost forever were restored to their rightful place in art history. Families who had given up hope of recovering their heritage gained unexpected closure. Perhaps the most profound impact came from the comprehensive mapping of how looted artwork had moved through the post-war decades, not as random occurrences, but as part of networks that connected art dealers, collectors, museum officials, and financial institutions across continents. This understanding forced a reassessment of many comfortable assumptions about the art world's recovery from the war era, and highlighted how unaddressed injustices had shaped cultural institutions in ways that continued to the present day. For Rachel Zegler, the FBI discovery brought an end to decades of secrecy, but also a form of liberation. The burden of maintaining her grandfather's legacy had defined her life, limiting her connections and requiring constant vigilance. As the recovered artwork began to find its way to museums and rightful heirs, and as the information archive contributed to both historical understanding and contemporary justice, she expressed a sense of fulfilled purpose, even amid the legal complexities and public attention. The case would be studied for years by law enforcement, art historians, ethicists, and legal scholars, each finding different lessons in the unusual story of private preservation operating outside official systems, yet ultimately serving the cause of cultural recovery and historical truth. The shocking discovery inside Rachel Zegler's property had indeed changed everything, not just for her in the quiet town of Millfield, but for our understanding of how art, history, justice, and memory intersect across generations.